Jai Hind everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. So today we are going to discuss further to our last video about Azure File Sync deployment. In the last video we had discussed about the introduction to Azure File Sync service and its benefits. Now let's start with deploying this particular service today. So first we'll be discussing the prerequisites that are required before the deployment. So you need a Azure file share in the same region that you want to deploy Azure File Sync service. Following storage account settings are also required. You would be needing SMB security settings, SMB 3.1.1 protocol version, at least NTLM v2 authentication and AES 128 GCM encryption. All these are available to be selected on the portal itself. You need to allow storage account key access, at least one supported instance of Windows Server to sync with Azure File Sync. So this Windows Server will be your server endpoint, and Azure File Sync, that particular file share, would work as the cloud endpoint. And just for the sake of installation, you need to disable the enhanced security configuration of the Internet Explorer. Further, now let's talk about the main deployment of storage sync service. The deployment of Azure File Sync starts with placing a storage sync service resource into a resource group of your selected subscription. You will create a trust relationship between your servers and this resource, and a server can only be registered to one storage sync service. This is an important point. As a result, it is recommended to deploy as many storage sync services as you need to separate group of servers. Keep in mind that the servers from different storage sync services cannot sync with each other. So they can't sync between the sync services. The storage sync services inherit access permissions from the subscription and resource group that it has been deployed into. Entities with write access can start syncing new sets of files from servers registered to this storage sync service and cause data to flow from Azure storage that is accessible to them. Now install the Azure File Sync Agent. So Azure File Sync Agent is a downloadable package that enables Windows Server to be synced with an Azure file share. It is downloaded on the Windows Server, this particular agent, and basically it facilitates the syncing process. So you need to leave the installation path as default to simplify troubleshooting and server maintenance. You will get the logs at this particular location, so it will be very sorted. So don't change the path during installation. And over to that, enable Microsoft updates to keep AFS up to date. All updates to the AFS agent, including feature updates and hotfixes, occur from Microsoft update only. So you can set it as automatic. Besides that, you need to register Windows Server with the storage sync service. This interface will pop up after the installation of the AFS agent. You need to select your respective subscription, the resource group, and then the storage sync service that you created in the last step. Registering your Windows Server with the storage sync service will establish a trust relationship between your server and the storage sync service. A server can only be registered to one storage sync service, as I told you before. Now, we would need to create a sync group and a cloud endpoint. A sync group defines the sync topology for a set of files. Endpoints within a sync group are kept in sync with each other. So there are two endpoints. There is cloud endpoint and there is server endpoint. A sync group must contain one cloud endpoint which represents the Azure file share, and one or more server endpoint. So there must be a cloud endpoint, that is the Azure file share, for the syncing to take place between the cloud storage and the on-premise storage. A server endpoint represents a path on a registered server. A server can have server endpoints in multiple sync groups. You can create as many sync groups as you need to appropriately describe your desired sync topology. A cloud endpoint is a pointer to a Azure file share. All server endpoints will sync with the cloud endpoint, making the cloud endpoint the hub. So as you must be aware of the hub and spoke model. So the hub will be the Azure file share and the spokes will be the server endpoints, all the server endpoints that have been uh, putted in the sync group. After that, you would need to create a server endpoint as well. A server endpoint must be a path on a registered server. Although the server endpoint can be on the system volume, server endpoints on the system volume may not use cloud tiering. Changing the path or drive letter after you have established a server endpoint on a volume is not supported. A registered server can support multiple server endpoints. However, a sync group can only have one server endpoint per registered server at any given time. Other server endpoints within sync group must be on different registered servers. So it's an important point and you must remember that. Well, with that, our slides have been completed and we'll move towards the deployment in lab practically. Thank you.